"Do you feel better now?" I asked, still holding the lighter I just used to ignite the last candle on my own cake. The room had frozen. My fingers were trembling, but not from the flame. Tessa took a breath, a victory inhale, then tilted her head with that condescending calm she uses when she wants to appear graceful. "We're not a couple, Frank. I'm just saying what we both know. It's been months. No intimacy. No partnership. Just two strangers with shared bills." The room wasn't silent. It was worse than that. It was listening. No one reached for more snacks. No one dared laugh like maybe it was a joke. And the Bluetooth speaker in the corner, which had just been playing Brighter Than the Sun, lost its connection. I didn't answer her. Not right away. I stood there behind the cake, staring at the gold script, "Happy Birthday Frankie," that now looked like a funeral headline. The candles flickered between us like they were confused whose side they were on. Tessa turned her back on me. Just like that. Back to her conversation. To her wine. To the guy beside her in the velvet jacket who, only hours earlier, I had helped park on the street because the driveway was full. I wish I could tell you I stormed out. I wish I could say I made a dramatic speech. I didn't. I stood there like a kid whose birthday balloon just popped. The saddest part? No one said a word to me. Not even my sister, who was by the drinks table the entire time. Not my old college roommate. Not even the woman who taught me third grade and still called me Frankie boy. They all just slowly resumed whatever was more comfortable than this. It wasn't until I was in the kitchen, alone, slicing my own cake, that the anger finally reached me. I didn't cry. That would have been easier. I laughed. I laughed, alone, holding a plate with a melting corner of chocolate mousse cake, because she had planned it. That line, that performance, she'd been rehearsing it. It was the way she paused, how her voice didn't shake. The way she looked right past me, like I was the stranger at my own party. I left the cake on the counter and walked straight into the laundry room. Not to hide. Not even to breathe. But to open the cabinet where we kept things nobody really notices. Her old journals were still there. Buried behind the detergent. That's where she hid them, thinking I wouldn't be interested in spiral-bound paper and nostalgia. But I had read them. All of them. That's how I knew what she was doing wasn't spontaneous. That's how I knew who she was doing it for. You want to know the worst part? I wasn't surprised. Not even a little. Because I had been waiting for this exact moment, for 6 months. And Tessa? She had just stepped into a game I was already 3 moves ahead in. She believed she had the upper hand. That smug little comment in front of everyone wasn't a cry for help, it was a chess move. One she assumed would pin me into silence. But what she didn't know was that I had already stopped playing her game long before that night. I had just been watching. Recording every flicker of disrespect, every glance too long at someone else, every moment she thought I was too naive or too soft to notice. The old version of me would have swallowed my pride, made excuses for her, maybe even begged to understand why she'd humiliate me like that. But that man? He died 3 months ago, the night I found the charger. It wasn't even the affair that broke me. It was the charger. A second phone, hidden in a drawer behind her Pilates gear. I never would have checked, but she had been acting distant, and not the usual kind. This was a coldness I couldn't explain. And when I opened that drawer by mistake, trying to find her ankle weights, I saw it. A rose gold charger, not the color of her regular one. Sleek. Clean. New. At first, I brushed it off. Then I checked the outlet behind the nightstand while she was in the shower. Sure enough, the second phone was there, quietly buzzing without a screen light. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't touch it. I just sat on the floor, back against the bed, staring at the wall while the shower ran, and she sang softly like nothing in her life had ever gone wrong. I knew if I opened that phone, something inside me would shatter for good. So I waited. And I watched. The days after that were a blur of her coming home late, saying she stayed after class to stretch. Her body wasn't sore. She never brought her mat back in the car. When I asked, she said the gym gave her a new locker. I didn't even argue. I just nodded. That was my specialty, nodding through disappointment. But in the background, I was collecting things. Little things. Receipts from a bar I'd never heard of. A parking ticket that didn't match the places she told me she'd been. A napkin with lipstick marks that didn't belong to her usual shade. And most of all, screenshots. I finally opened that phone one afternoon when she was at her deep tissue therapy appointment, and I read the text she sent him. Not just any texts. Gratitude. Desire. She thanked him for making her feel like herself again. Said I had become an obligation, not a connection. I was a ghost she lived with. Her exact words. And yet, I still said nothing. Because I knew her well enough to predict she would need a stage, a moment of performance to justify what she was doing. And sure enough, she chose my birthday to make her dramatic little declaration in front of a crowd. It was cowardly. Calculated. And exactly what I'd been waiting for. After that night, I didn't sleep in the same bed anymore. I started sleeping in the den. She said nothing. Not even a good night. It's funny, the silence between us used to feel accidental. Now, it felt like a full-blown strategy. But what she didn't notice was how I started changing things behind the scenes. I got a separate bank account. I removed my name from the joint streaming subscriptions and utilities, small, quiet steps. Then, I went deeper. I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not to file anything, not yet, but to understand what I could protect. How deep her debts were. And most importantly, what was still mine. You see, she had always thought I was too soft. She once told her sister during a Christmas call that I'd never leave no matter how bad things got. But she never knew I overheard that. I never forgot it. And the irony is, the only reason I stayed so long was because I wanted her to show her true self without restraint. And now she had. The morning after the party, she made coffee like nothing happened. Didn't even acknowledge the mess she left behind. She wore that silky robe she saves for weekends and said, "You should clean up the cake today, it's still all over the table." As if her words hadn't shattered the foundation of our marriage 12 hours earlier. So I smiled, really smiled, and said, "Sure, I'll clean it up." She walked off, content. Still assuming I'd do what I always did, bury my feelings and pretend her cruelty was just a personality quirk. But she didn't know I had already scheduled the next party. And this time, she wouldn't be invited. There's something liberating about planning an event you know the guest of honor will never attend. It was a Thursday afternoon when I booked the venue, a little rustic winery an hour outside the city that Tessa had always claimed was too tacky for her taste. That made it perfect. Private, unfamiliar, and out of the way. I told my co-workers it was a small post-birthday wine tasting with friends. Told my sister it was a break from the madness at home. I didn't tell Tessa anything. I knew she wouldn't ask. She had stopped asking questions months ago. Her curiosity about my life had flatlined, same as her affection. The truth was, this wasn't a party. It was a performance, mine. And for once, I wasn't the background character. I invited people who mattered to me, people who had been pushed away over the years by Tessa's subtle control. Old college friends. My cousin Lane, who Tessa always said was too weird to be around. Even my former boss, Gloria, the one Tessa called an insecure divorcee, because she dared to compliment my presentation once. I wanted them to see I was still standing. Still breathing. Still capable of being something other than the guy who disappeared into the wallpaper of his own life. The night before the event, I pretended to fall asleep on the den couch early. Tessa didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't care. She was too busy texting with her phone tilted away from me, laughing at memes or men, I'll never know which. I left quietly at dawn. Packed a duffel with just enough, a button-down, slacks, shoes that didn't scream desperation. I took the older car so she wouldn't notice. Left a note that said, went to see Lane. Back late. And then I drove, the radio silent, the road long. Somewhere past the city limits, the tension in my chest began to loosen, like my ribs had been tightropes and someone finally cut the wires. When I arrived, I didn't feel confident. That's not my thing. But I felt present. And that was enough. People came. Smiled. Hugged me. They asked why Tessa wasn't there. I said she had other plans. They didn't push. A few exchanged glances, maybe they suspected something, maybe they just remembered how uncomfortable she always looked in group settings that didn't center around her. We drank wine. We laughed. Lane brought his guitar and played a song we wrote in college. It was off-key and brilliant. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for existing. But the real moment, the one I had rehearsed in my head 100 times, happened just after sunset. The winery had this old wooden platform with string lights, where people sometimes danced. I stood there with a glass in my hand and cleared my throat. I just wanted to thank you all for coming tonight, I said, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself. I know it's a bit strange, a birthday party after the birthday. But really, this isn't about that. People leaned in. Some smiled. Some tilted their heads. I kept going. It's about honesty. I've spent the last few years pretending. Pretending I was happy. Pretending I was chosen. Pretending that the silence in my marriage was just a phase. But it wasn't. It was the truth wrapped in 1,000 layers of politeness. A few people looked away. Some nodded slowly. I spent my birthday being told, publicly, that my relationship was over. That I was just a placeholder. And for once, I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just listened. And now I'm done pretending. No one clapped. This wasn't that kind of speech. But I saw tears in Gloria's eyes. I saw Lane put his guitar down slowly, like he'd just realized something. And in that moment, I felt seen. Later that night, I stepped away to the edge of the property. The sky was clear, stars shameless. I pulled out my phone. 10 missed calls. All from Tessa. And one text. Where the hell are you? Who are you with? We need to talk. Now. I didn't reply. I didn't even open it. I just stared at the screen and let the battery run down until it shut off in my hand. She was panicking. Good. Because for the first time in a very long time, she didn't know what I was doing, and that meant she wasn't in control anymore. What she didn't realize was that while she was rehearsing the scene at my birthday, I was writing the final act. And when the curtain dropped, she was going to hear the silence she'd forced me to live in, only this time, it would be hers. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was already rising behind the neighbor's hedges, casting a pale orange glow over the siding of our house. For a second, I sat in the car with the engine off, just listening to the world wake up around me. Birds. A distant lawn mower. Nothing from inside. No motion in the windows. No light behind the blinds. I stepped out slowly, half expecting the front door to swing open mid-stride. It didn't. I unlocked it myself. Tessa was sitting in the kitchen, legs crossed under her silk robe, a cup of coffee in front of her that she hadn't touched. Her phone was clutched in both hands like she'd been bracing for a fight all night. You turned your phone off, she said without looking up. I nodded and walked past her toward the sink, pouring myself a glass of water like I hadn't just gone missing for 20 hours. Her tone didn't sound worried, it sounded cornered. She wasn't upset that I'd vanished. She was upset that she had no idea why. "Where were you?" she asked, this time with more pressure behind the words. I took a long sip, turned to her, and shrugged. "Out." She blinked. That was it. Just blinked. She wasn't used to not getting full explanations, tearful apologies, or insecure reassurance. I usually gave her a play-by-play of my day. But not this time. Her jaw tightened. "Are you going to explain? Or are we playing games now?" I put the glass down slowly and looked her in the eyes for the first time in weeks. "You made an announcement at my birthday party. In front of everyone. And now you want answers from me?" She opened her mouth, then shut it. For once, Tessa didn't have a script ready. "I didn't mean it like that," she finally muttered. "It came out wrong." "No, Tessa," I said, stepping closer. "It came out exactly how you wanted it to. The way you planned. You wanted a scene, and you got one. But you forgot something important: when you push someone off the cliff, you don't get to decide if they fly or disappear." Her expression cracked just enough for me to see the panic behind it. She wasn't used to me talking like this. Not without shaking. Not without second-guessing myself. She stood up. "Frank, this is ridiculous. You're being dramatic." I laughed. It wasn't forced. It wasn't bitter. It was real. Right. Because saying we're not a couple in front of 20 people was subtle and respectful. "I was angry," she said sharply. "You've been distant for months." "No," I interrupted. "I've been quiet. There's a difference. I gave you space. I let you drift. I waited to see if you'd even notice. You didn't. You just filled that space with someone else and thought I'd be too spineless to do anything about it." She flinched. Just slightly. But I saw it. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, voice shaky now. "Oh, but I do," I replied. "I know about the other phone. I know about the hotel in Edgebrook. I know about Remy and the Pilates sessions that ended up in wine bars." Her face drained of color like I'd just switched off her bloodstream. "You went through my things." I observed. The way someone does when they've been treated like a ghost long enough to become one. She sat down again, fast, like her knees buckled. "You don't understand what I've been dealing with," she whispered. "You're never really present. You just exist. You let things happen to you. You wait for people to lead." I felt alone. I nodded, slowly. "And instead of talking to me, you performed for strangers. You humiliated me to justify your betrayal. You wanted to be the victim in a story where you were the one holding the knife. I didn't mean to hurt you, Frank." "Yes, you did," I said flatly. "But what you didn't mean to do, was lose control." Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't beg to be filled. The kind that hangs in the room like smoke after something has burned. I walked past her, upstairs, and into the bedroom. I opened the closet and took down the suitcase she used for her solo trips. I packed only my things. Just clothes. Essentials. No note. No apology. When I came back downstairs, she hadn't moved. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Out," I said again. And then I opened the front door, sunlight spilling onto the floor behind me. "I'll be in touch," I added before I closed it. But this, whatever this was. It's not a marriage anymore. You made sure of that. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I just stepped into the fresh morning air and let it hit my face like a verdict. Because for the first time in years, the silence following me, wasn't mine. I didn't drive far that morning. I didn't have a destination. Just needed space. That strange kind of emotional space you can't measure in miles but somehow chase with a steering wheel. I passed diners with blinking open signs, sleepy dogs on porches, joggers with earbuds who probably had no idea how good their lives still were. I envied them. Not because they had perfect lives, I'm not that delusional, but because they weren't me in that moment, a man whose home had become a stage, whose wife had rehearsed his downfall like it was her one-woman Broadway debut. After about an hour, I pulled into a parking lot outside a bookstore cafe. I'd been there once before, years ago, when Tessa and I were still playing house with smiles and lazy Sunday mornings. I remember she complained the coffee was weak and the chairs were too soft. We left after 9 minutes. But today, it felt perfect. Nobody knew me. No fake birthday banners. No eyes watching to see if I'd cry or collapse. I stepped inside, bought the strongest black coffee they had, and sank into a corner seat by a window. For the first time in ages, I exhaled without forcing it. I must have sat there for an hour, just sipping, scrolling through my phone, deleting old texts from her I didn't want to reread but didn't have the heart to keep. That's when someone approached me. Frank. It took me a moment to recognize her. Rachel Miller. We worked together years ago, back when I was still trying to climb the corporate ladder and Tessa hadn't yet decided I was too ordinary to stand beside her. Rachel had always been kind in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. She once covered a presentation for me when I had the flu and still credited me in front of the entire team. I hadn't seen her in maybe 6 years. She looked at me, puzzled. You okay? I must have looked awful. Hair uncombed, circles under my eyes like bruises from emotional shrapnel. I smiled without showing teeth. I've had better weeks. She hesitated, then sat across from me without asking. You look like someone who needs to be asked something no one's asked him in a long time. I blinked. What's that? She leaned forward, voice soft but steady. What do you want? I stared at her. Not because it was a strange question, but because it was the first time someone had genuinely asked me that in years. Not, what does Tessa want, not, what would keep things peaceful, not, what's best for the household. Me. Just me. And I didn't know how to answer. I don't think I know anymore. That's fair, she said without judgment. But maybe that's where you start. We talked. For over 2 hours. About nothing and everything. She didn't pry, but I told her things anyway. I told her how Tessa had hijacked my birthday. How she'd slowly eroded our marriage like wind on old paint. How I hadn't felt loved, not truly, in almost 2 years. I told her I found the other phone. That I stayed quiet because I didn't know what I was allowed to feel anymore. I told her I'd left the house that morning without a plan, just a bag and a last shred of dignity. Rachel didn't offer advice. She just listened. And when she finally spoke again, it wasn't pity. It wasn't generic comfort. It was, you know you're allowed to stop carrying shame that doesn't belong to you, right? I felt something shift inside me. Not a dramatic epiphany. More like a lock quietly clicking open in a door I didn't realize had been sealed. She gave me her number. Told me to reach out if I ever wanted to talk again. Then she hugged me, not the awkward kind, but the kind that reminded you you're still human. That your skin isn't made of mistakes. After she left, I sat there in the booth with cold coffee and a warm sense of clarity. It wasn't just about Tessa anymore. It was about all the times I disappeared into the background of my own life, let louder people dictate the narrative, let guilt take the wheel. That was over. The next move wasn't going to be quiet. And it wasn't going to be made from the den couch or a dusty guest bed. I picked up my phone, reopened the legal email thread I'd left unanswered for weeks, and typed 7 words that tasted like freedom. Let's proceed. I'm ready this time. The email had barely left my outbox when my phone started buzzing. At first, I thought it might have been Rachel, maybe checking in after our long talk. But it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. It was her. 3 missed calls from Tessa, followed by a string of texts that started polite, spiraled into frantic, and landed somewhere near threatening. The last one just said, "Don't do anything stupid, Frank. You'll regret it." I stared at the message like it had been written in a language I no longer spoke. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I didn't understand her. The same woman who had once written me love notes on diner napkins was now warning me not to challenge her. That's the thing about people like Tessa, they don't get scared when you cry or beg. They get scared when you stop doing both. When you go quiet. When you stop giving them anything to feed on. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked myself a hotel. Not a luxury suite, not some overpriced spa retreat. Just a clean, quiet room with a door I could lock behind me. A place where the silence belonged to me and not the tension hanging over my home like a storm cloud that never cleared. The first night there, I slept. Not like usual, where my body shut down but my mind kept grinding. I slept. Solid. Dreamless. When I woke up, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't wonder if Tessa had texted. I showered. Ate breakfast at a diner where the waitress called me Han and topped up my coffee without asking. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I was being watched. Measured. Critiqued. That afternoon, I met with the lawyer again. This time, I came prepared. We discussed property. Accounts. That secret line of credit she'd opened 6 months ago, the one I pretended not to notice. She was planning her exit long before my birthday. She just didn't count on me leaving first. Or with leverage. What I didn't expect, though, was what came next. When I returned to the hotel that evening, there was a letter slipped under the door. Not an envelope. Just a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. My name scrawled across the top in Tessa's unmistakable handwriting. I unfolded it with a slow, cautious dread. It read, "I know what you're doing. If you try to make this ugly, I will take everything. You're not built for war, Frank. Let me walk away with what I've earned and we can both move on." She signed it with a flourish, Tessa, no love, no yours. Just her name, like she was ending a business memo. I sat on the bed, heart pounding. Not because I was scared of losing the house or the money. I could rebuild. I always could. But because that one letter proved something I had suspected but hoped wasn't true, she saw me as a liability. A weak link to be discarded. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't confused. She was strategic. Cold. Focused on winning whatever game she believed we were playing. And that's when I understood something that changed the entire frame of the war. She didn't just want freedom. She wanted to be the one who left me broken. It wasn't enough for her to start over. She needed a version of the story where I was the pitiful man left behind, the guy who couldn't hold his marriage together, who was too soft, too bland, too forgettable. And that image? That false, carefully curated narrative? I couldn't let it happen. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I wanted the truth to exist somewhere, even if it was just in court documents and quiet nods from people who had believed her first. So, I called the lawyer back. "I want to make sure she gets exactly what she's legally entitled to," I said, calmly. "Not $1 more." "And if she pushes?" he asked. "Then she learns what silence can do when it's finally backed by facts." Because what Tessa didn't realize is that while she was practicing emotional arson for show, I'd been quietly rebuilding a firewall. Every receipt. Every login. Every late-night text to her mystery man that pinged my old shared iCloud. I hadn't thrown any of it in her face. I had simply waited, collected, stored. She thought my silence made me weak. It didn't. It made me ready. 2 days passed after the letter at the hotel, and I heard nothing. Not a word. No texts. No calls. No staged voicemail where she pretended to cry like she had once done when I forgot our anniversary during a brutal work week. Tessa had gone dark, and for a moment, I wondered if she had realized it was over. Truly over. But deep down, I knew better. People like her don't fade away. They wait, they twist, and then they pounce. And sure enough, on the third morning, the storm came to collect. It started with a message from my lawyer, "You need to see this." Attached was a letter filed by Tessa's legal team. It was a list of claims. Not divorce terms, accusations. False ones. Things I never thought she'd dare try to pull. According to the document, I had become verbally unpredictable, emotionally unsafe, and financially erratic. She claimed I'd tried to cut her off and alienate her from the shared assets we had built together. It even suggested I had manipulated her emotionally through extended silence and non-communication. That last one nearly made me laugh. I read the letter 3 times, and with each pass, the weight in my chest didn't grow heavier, it lifted. Because now I saw her for what she truly was. Not just unfaithful. Not just cold. But deeply afraid of losing control, of being unmasked. Her entire sense of self had been built on the illusion that she could walk away untouched, looking like the wounded party while I became the husk in the background of her reinvention. I picked up my phone, heart pounding but mind clear, and texted her 3 words. "Meet me tomorrow." I chose a neutral place, a community center conference room, glass walls, nothing private, nothing volatile. I wanted her to show up polished, smiling, prepared to sell her version of the story like she always did. And she did. She arrived 10 minutes early, in heels too high for casual wear, with makeup that said, "I'm composed." She didn't bring her lawyer. That told me everything. She still thought I could be steered. That with the right tone, the right condescension, she could get me to fold. "You look rested," she said as I walked in. "Hotel beds do wonders," I replied, sitting across from her. She blinked, as if not expecting me to answer so simply. "So, what is this?" I placed a file on the table between us. No words. Just waited. She opened it. Inside were printed screenshots. Receipts. Call logs. The invoice from the hotel in Edgebrook she'd claimed was for a friend's bachelorette weekend. A signed confirmation from the private instructor she told me she stopped training with last year, the one she'd still been paying in cash. Her face changed as she flipped through them. Slowly. Page by page. I watched her confidence drain like ink bleeding from cheap paper. When she looked up, her expression had no anger, no shame, just disbelief. "You've been collecting these?" "For months," I said. "Why?" Her voice cracked slightly. "Because you wanted a performance," I said, leaning forward. "You wanted to play the strong, empowered woman leaving the weak, bitter man. You humiliated me on my birthday to set the stage. You wanted sympathy from friends. A clean break. A man too nice to fight back." Tessa opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand and cut her off. "I let you write that version of the story in your head. I let you live in it. But this," I tapped the file, "this is the real story. And if you drag me through court with lies, this becomes public. You don't get to weaponize my silence and walk away with my dignity." She pushed the file back toward me like it had scorched her fingers. "You don't want to fight dirty, Frank. You never have." "No, I don't," I said. "But I won't let you bury me just because you're afraid of who you've become." For the first time since that night at the party, she didn't have a clever reply. She just sat there, blinking, clutching her purse like it held her last excuse. "Let's not do this, Frank," she said, her voice suddenly soft. Too soft. "Let's just settle. Quietly. Like adults. No courtroom drama. No mudslinging. I'll take what's fair. I stood up, folding the file under my arm. You had that chance the moment you told a room full of people we weren't a couple anymore. I'm not trying to destroy you, Tessa. I'm just done letting you dictate the narrative. I walked out. She didn't follow. That night, back at the hotel, I got an email from her lawyer's office. A revised settlement offer. Cleaner. No insults. No demands. Just numbers. It wasn't generous, but it was real. I could live with that. I shut my laptop, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled. Not because I'd won. But because she hadn't. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday. No courtroom drama, no headlines, no bitter final showdown. Just paperwork, signatures, and a quiet drive back to the same hotel room I had turned into my sanctuary. Tessa didn't show up in person, her lawyer submitted everything electronically. I half expected one last theatrical monologue from her, a closing soliloquy to cement her version of events. But she stayed silent. Maybe out of shame. Maybe out of fear. Or maybe, finally, she realized she'd lost the power she once held over me. There was no celebration. No champagne cork popping. Just a long walk down an empty side street near the hotel, the cool air brushing across my face like a clean slate. I passed an elderly man watering flowers outside his porch. He nodded. I nodded back. It felt strange, but grounding. That nod meant something. Like the universe was acknowledging, you made it out. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel for the last time. My things, what few I had, fit neatly into the trunk of my car. I didn't go back to the house. We'd agreed she could stay there, and honestly, I didn't want it. That house was filled with echoes of a man I no longer wanted to be. A man who tiptoed around silence, slept beside indifference, and convinced himself that survival was the same as happiness. I rented a small apartment not far from the bookstore cafe, the same one where Rachel and I had talked, where something in me had shifted. The place was modest, nothing fancy. Exposed brick, creaky floors, and a window that overlooked a bakery. But it was mine. Every inch of it. No passive-aggressive sticky notes on the fridge. No second phone hidden behind yoga mats. No pretending. Just peace. Rachel and I kept talking. Slowly at first, texts, a coffee here and there. There was no rush. She never asked too many questions, never treated me like a broken thing. She just listened, and sometimes that was more intimate than anything physical. One evening, she brought over dinner, lasagna she'd made from scratch, and we ate on the floor because I hadn't bought a table yet. Halfway through the meal, she looked at me and said, "You seem taller." I laughed. I think I just stopped curling into myself. We didn't define what we were. Not yet. And that was okay. I wasn't trying to replace Tessa. I wasn't rushing to prove anything. I was just living, finally, and for the first time in years, I felt like I deserved the life that was forming around me. Weeks passed. Then months. I started writing again, just little things. Essays. Thoughts. Reflections. One of them got picked up by a small publication. It was about silence, and how sometimes the quietest exits are the loudest statements you'll ever make. I didn't sign my full name, just Frank. It was enough. And then, one morning, almost a year to the day since my birthday party imploded, I found myself walking by that old winery. Not for any special reason. Just curious. It looked the same, warm, rustic, a little dusty around the edges. I stood there for a while, watching strangers dance under the same string lights I'd stood beneath, wondering if they knew how sacred the ordinary can feel when you've survived the chaos. Tessa. I haven't heard from her in months. I heard through mutual friends she moved to the city and tried to start over. Good for her. I hope she finds what she's looking for. But she's no longer part of my story. Not really. Just a chapter. One with sharp edges, but one I closed with both hands. My story now is quieter. Simpler. Better. And in that quiet, I've found something unexpected. Myself.